All right, let's start with a quick word of prayer and we're going to jump in. Dear God, thank you so much for each person that's here and all the hard work that they have put in along with their teams. And we just want to ask you to bless them and bless our time together. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, we wanted to go over a number of things with you tonight as we prepare for the tournament. And so I'm going to be sharing my screen and I'm going to be jumping back and forth between a couple of different things. So if you have a little bit of patience with me as I juggle screens tonight, that would be great. Let me just get to where I want to start here. And I'm going to go ahead and share a screen. All right, so first of all, AdventistRobotics.net, our website. We still have some teams that have not registered for their event yet. You may have registered with FIRST, so you may have a team number. That's why we're contacting you, but you may not have registered for the event itself. So if you need to do that, it's a fairly simple process. Just to go to Adventist Robotics, and if you pull down here under registration and you go to FLL event registration, this is done on our website and not on the FIRST website. And you come down here and right here you choose the event that you want to participate in and just fill out the form, pay the fee for that, and you're all set to go. So that's fairly straightforward. Also on the Adventist Robotics website, for those of you that are educators, we have something new, and that is the NAD standards alignment. So this can be helpful when you're working in the class. This is not season specific. So we have standards for pre-K through 12th grade for FIRST. So I'm going to go for K through 8 here in math. I'll just open this up and show it to you. So here, this is First Lego League, and you'll notice this is Discover right here. If you look right in this area here, it shows that it's Discover. So Discover is for grades pre-K through first grade. And if you scroll on down, that's Discover. Here's Explore. Explore is for grades 2 through 4. And if you come on down below, then you'll come to Challenge. And this has both Challenge and Explore for some of these for 4th grade, because 4th grade can be either Challenge or Explore. And these are all based on our NAD standards, and it lets you know what is covered and what is not covered in that area. So each one of these has it. Now, in addition to this, of course, each season dealing with energy, there's going to be things, for example, this season that's going to be season specific. So I just wanted to let you know about that. You can explore that and take a look at those resources that you have available to you there for that. So that's on Adventist Robotics. Just under Teach Robotics, we have the NAD standards alignment right there. All right. The next thing we want to talk about just briefly is the firstlegoleague.org. And let me just pull up my chat here, chat window. I'll drop this link in the chat just in case you don't have it handy. But firstlegoleague.org/season are a number of things here that you want to make sure you're paying attention to as we're getting ready for the tournament. You're nearing the tournament. There's a couple of things we want to look at in specific related to this. Of course, the robot game rule book, we're going to review that later on. That's important. Challenge updates, there hasn't been anything since October 18, so we're good there. Participation rules, that's a good thing to review as you're getting ready. What are the requirements for participating in a first Lego League Challenge tournament? There also is let's see, the big thing we want to talk about here is challenge judging is the thing we want to talk about in this one here. So these are the rubrics, and we'll take a look at the rubrics in just a moment, but make sure that, and we'll review those. That's what you're going to be evaluated on. So make sure that you're reviewing those. And then we have the judging session flowchart. So in the judging session flowchart, and this is also in your team leader guide, this refers to the 30 minutes that you have. And it's very important as you're coaching your teams to help them manage this time and work with this time and not let it get away from them. So they're going to walk in. They have at the most 2 minutes to get in, say hi, introduce the team, who they are, make sure everything's set up. And of course, once they walk in that door, remember as a coach, your role stops. We do allow one adult coach or mentor in the room with them, but you must be sitting behind the team in a way where you're not having eye contact with them, or they're not having eye contact with you, I should say. Whichever way around you want to think about that. You can watch them, but they shouldn't be able to have eye contact with you, and you can't help them with the setup. It's up to them. We do not plan on having any multimedia resources available for teams in the judging rooms. Then you have a 5-minute innovation project presentation, and that's all you have. So that's something that you need to practice your timing. You don't have to take all 5 minutes. There's not a penalty if you take 4 or 4.5 or even 3, but you need to make sure that you communicate everything you have, and the judges are going to use that rubric to evaluate you. Then after that, you have the innovation project questions and answers. This is an opportunity for the judges to get clarification, to ask them questions in case there's something they didn't understand from that. But it's really important that your team covers the things that are in the rubric as much as possible to the best of their ability. Then you're going to have robot design. And in the robot design part, you will have we have sent out to the tournament directors a mat, a 20 by 30 inch picture of the field. So that will be in front of them. You're not going to have a full field there, but you will have a picture, and it's laminated. And if hopefully they'll have a dry erase marker, but you can certainly indicate to the judges on there what your robot is doing to help put some visual context to it as you're talking about your robot design and the missions that you do and your game strategy for that. So that's part of that. So your team will have 5 minutes to explain to the judges what their robot does. And again, what you're using, what is it you want to communicate to them? Well, it's all based on the rubric. And we'll take a look at that again a little bit later. Then there's 5 more minutes for question and answers. There's some 3 minutes then for core values reflection, and then about 5 minutes for feedback for the team and what they're doing. So that's your 30-minute session. Of course, core values is evaluated throughout it, so you want to make sure that is working, and the team is aware of that, and that's kind of woven through everything else that you have. So that's kind of the judging session flow chart, and we'll take a look at those rubrics in just a second here. In fact, let me just jump and do that. I have them somewhere else too, but the rubrics are here. We can look at them in color. This is the let's see if we come up. This is a core values rubric, and in here it's basically discovery. This I've heard is going to change next season, but this is what we have this season. Minimally observed across the team. Sorry about that. Inconsistently observed across the team, or consistently observed across the team. So that's for each one of these. So it's an observation during the judging session. So how are you going to have that observed? Innovation project. Here is the innovation project. And actually, I'm going to stop sharing and reshare here because I can highlight things in something else just a little bit better. Well, I thought I had it here anyway. Well, okay. I will go back to that. My apologies. I thought I had it in another window, and I don't have it in another window. But keep in mind on the rubric here, just the one thing I want to point out is this here is one row. This is a second row. So each one of these rows, the judges will check one of those 4 boxes. And a strong 2 is not a 3. And a good team will have 3s. To have a 4, you really have to do something to exceed and go above and beyond that. So you really have to impress the judges to have a 4. And you will get copies of these back afterwards, letting you know how the judges perceived your team. So that'll happen at the end. So you'll have that. So again, that's the innovation project. This is the robot design. So this is a great time to start talking about each one of these rows and working with them. What are they going to tell the judges in that robot design presentation or in the innovation project presentation? They have those 2 5-minute sections that they're going to prepare for, and obviously any questions, follow-up questions as they come along. All right, any questions on judging? And we have Fiona and Sam are with us. They're kind of helping us with some of our judge training. They're involved with a lot of first things in, well, I think they were here. Oh yeah, they're there. All right. So they
We're
were
here.
involved. All right. They've been involved with First in North Carolina very heavily for quite a few years, and they've been helping us out with a few things. So Fiona, anything I missed in that we need to highlight?
Um, so I'd like to mention briefly that the core values section that says reflection. Oh, it's in the flow chart. It's in the flow
in the flow
chart.
chart.
It's the last 3 minutes, and it says core values reflection. It's important to know, if you haven't done this before, that that is the time period that the judges are going to ask the teams specific core values questions. It's not a core values presentation or anything like that. Some people get confused because of the term reflection.
Yeah. And in the past, we had there was a core values poster that was required and that kind of thing, and none of that is required any longer. Yeah, so thank you for that clarification. That's a really good one, because in the past, there was kind of an expectation. There was a core values judging session, so they kind of had some kind of presentation or something they did. And in this case, there isn't a core values presentation. You just want to make sure that the core values are displayed and represented throughout the judging session. Interwoven through everything else you do. So, all right. Any questions from anybody on anything related to judging? All righty. In that case, we're going to go ahead and move on. One area I want to highlight back here again is that tournaments do need volunteers. And if you have some extra adults that are willing to volunteer, that aren't necessarily, they may be coming along that aren't essential or may not, may have the ability or willingness to do that. There's many roles that a team, a individual that's associated with the team cannot be a judge, so cannot volunteer for. So if you're associated with a team, you can't volunteer to be a referee or a judge, but there's many other things that are needed for help along those lines. So if you have some, please do keep that in mind. We would definitely, the tournament directors would definitely appreciate that. And on this page here are listed out all of the different tournaments and links to where you can sign up on First specifically to that. They'd have to create an account. There is screening they have to go through, fairly basic background screening for all volunteers. But if you've done that with your school volunteer screening, it's the same system. So you can link that account in. So just want to make a note on that. The other thing we want to talk about is youth team registration. And I'm going to do First youth registration. I'm going to show you how easy this is. So here, and we have First youth registration or first youth team member registration. And if I click on this, the very first link is directions on how to do that. And there's a button right here. They can click on it. What you need to let your parents know, the best thing to let them know is that you are a First LEGO League Challenge team and what your team number is. And then they can connect into First. And this should take them right into the First website. And they would log in here. And I'm not going to go ahead and do it, but they're going to log in here and then they'll fill out that form and give consent. It basically, the consent and release is done there. So please make sure that your team members have done that. And then you will print out a roster in your team information. There's when you go into your First dashboard, you'll be able to accept the team members in case you have somebody join the team that wasn't, maybe they typed the number in wrong and they're not really part of your team. You don't have to have them on your roster. But you would then accept them on your roster and then you print out that roster, and that roster is brought to your check-in when you check in for the day. And it's very important because if you don't have that roster, then you can't participate. So please work with your tournament directors to make sure that that's all done. It will really help them out and reduce their stress on the day of the tournament if you've got all that ready to go and checked off there. So that's a very valuable thing. All right, so we have talked about the judging process. The next thing I am going to switch sharing here for is the refereeing. And there are definitely some specifics related to refereeing that we want to make sure that we share. So I'm going to switch to my PDF here. And this is, just to give you an idea, this is the field. This is kind of what you will see, I should say, a picture. This is an example of the picture you'll see in front of you at the judging session, kind of a picture like this, top down, that they'll be able to describe what their robot does. So a couple things here in the rules. So I'm looking at the robot game rule book here. So this is a robot game rule book. This is the field. There's a couple rules. And Sam, as I get into here, if you have some clarifications, feel free to jump in. I'm going to try to cover as we discussed here. And we've talked to the referees about this. There's a couple things that we want to highlight to you just for clarification. I'm a little cautious on this because we're careful in these, since I'm not the referee there at the field. I'm not the one making the calls. However, there are things that we're giving guidance on and some areas where there might be just a little bit of clarification of how we will address things, how we're telling our referees to address things where there's some ambiguity. So what we want to talk about here specifically to begin with, let me come back up to this, is this dinosaur. So we have the dinosaur that starts over in the right hand or blue home area. And this dinosaur creates it's kind of a fun item. As you know, you can take the dinosaur over to the left side over here and to the red area, and then that will score. The other thing you can do is take one of the energy units or the battery, rechargeable battery, and put it in there, and the head raises up, and you can score it. So there's two different ways you can score. So you're transporting across here. So keep that in mind. That's what we're related to, is it has to come from here over to the other side, and you can't carry it across things. The only way it can go across is by being transported by the robot. You can't physically, the team members can't hand it off. So as we look at these rules with that in mind, so I'm going to take a look specifically at the highlighted rules. So, and we're dealing with interruptions. So if a robot leaves the base, and in this case, we're talking about a robot that is carrying the dinosaur. So think about that in this context. If it's carrying the dinosaur and it leaves the base, and you interrupt it. So if you touch the robot, you interrupt it, what are the different things you can do? Well, here's what happens to the robot when it's interrupted. If the robot was completely outside of home, and these are the scenarios we're talking about, if it's partly into home, you can bring it into home. We'll come back to that one. But if it's completely out of home, you can return it to either home area. So if the robot's halfway across and you interrupt it, you can pick it up and you can return it back to the blue area, or you can go across to the left area and the home area. So you might think, smart, ingenious team members might think, hey, that means I only have to get the robot with the dinosaur out of home, and I can interrupt it and I can get it to score. So, because it says if the object was with the robot when it was launched, this is this area right down here, keep it and bring it with the robot, right? So that means if I interrupt it, I can take it to the red area. However, I would just like to point out rule number 3 in this section, which the highlighted area of this is that teams also may not interrupt their robot in such a way that they earn points from it. So that's the catch with that one. So that means that you can't interrupt the robot and transport it across and have it earn points in a way that could do that. And, you know, as I actually, Sam, I know we talked about this a little bit more, but as I'm reading it again, it sounds to me like they can't take it, if they interrupt it there, they can't, if it's carrying that, they cannot take it to the red area. They have to take it back to the blue area, possibly even. But definitely the dinosaur has to go back to the blue area. And the dinosaur can't, if they take it across to the other area, it would not score points for that part of it. That's the most important thing, is they cannot score points that way. All right, so that's super important. Now, if it's If the robot is partly outside of home, they can bring that robot into the home area. So if it's going into home and it's partly out of home, then they can take it in. And then of course, transportation rules, that kind of thing apply. If it's on its way in, that's one thing, but it's really dealing with the situation where it's completely out of home. That's the area we're dealing with. So that's any questions on that one? All right, the other one that we wanted to talk about was if the object was obtained after the robot was launched. So what happens if it's obtained after it's launched? So there is an energy storage unit. Let me come back up here. So right here in this area, let me actually grab my highlighter so we can kind of highlight that. There's a little tray there that you could drag out. This is one example. There are others. And what happens if you're dragging this back and it's partly in home, or your robot is in home and it's not in home? Sam, do you want to talk about this one just a little bit, just to help me clarify it?
Yes. So there's a couple of different scenarios that we want to think about here. One of them is if the object was obtained after the robot was launched, give it to the referee for the remainder of the match. The important part here is this is what happens to equipment or mission models that were in contact with the robot when it was interrupted outside home, even partly. So our first scenario, you pull that tray out, and then the robot turns around and goes back to home in such a way that the tray enters home first, but the robot gets stuck so that the robot is sticking out of home. The tray is completely in home, but the robot is partly out. Now, in past seasons, we judged that you lose a precision token, definitely, because you're interrupting your robot partly in home. But in past seasons, we judge what happens to the tray based on where the tray is, where the mission model is. This season, you can see this language here. What happens to the mission model is based on where the robot is, not where the mission model is. So in this case, even though the tray is completely in home, the referee will take the tray away and keep it for the match. And this is also likely to happen with energy units, particularly the ones from the windmill, because those are often brought into home that way. So you want to make very sure that your robot's completely in home when you're bringing that kind of thing home. The second scenario, which is most likely to happen with the tray specifically, is if the robot is completely in home. So in this scenario, the robot is backing up to bring the tray into home. So the tray is dragging behind the robot, and the robot enters home, and it's completely in home, but it hits the wall and gets stuck, and the tray is partly outside of home, but the robot is completely in home. And there's a little bit of confusion here because, again, it's the robot that we're worrying about. However, if we go over to point 2, yeah, we can see here. So if a piece of equipment or a mission model is dropped or left outside of home, so this is the rule that we're going to use to judge what happens if the tray is partly in home, the robot's completely in home. Now, if it rests partly in home, it stays as is unless the robot changes it, or the technicians may remove it by hand. Now, in this situation, part of this is going to depend on how the robot is carrying that tray. If the robot can be picked up and the technicians pick it up and the tray doesn't move, then we do this exactly as it says. This is then it's sitting partly in home, and the technicians can remove it by hand, but if they do, it must be given to the referee for the remainder of the match, or they can leave it. They're not allowed to interact with it, but they can leave it there, and maybe a later mission will push it completely into home where they can interact with it. Alternatively, if the technicians pick up the robot and that picking up causes the tray to move into home, then we will treat that as if they removed it by hand, because it was the hands that caused the robot to move. So functionally, they removed the tray by hand. And then, so it must be given to the referee. So these are kind of corner cases. but there's some things that may surprise teams that have competed in past years. We wanted to make sure that you had advance warning of some of this.
Yeah, because the goal is not to catch them, but the goal is to be fair with everybody.
Yes.
And have a positive experience for everybody. So there's a couple things, and this was really one of the big reasons we wanted to have this before tonight is in the timing is to be able to share these particular things related to this so that you were aware of them and teams could plan accordingly depending on their strategies and game strategies and could adjust for it before the tournament. Any questions on those rules?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that the robot has to start off completely in the home area. So we get picky about our questions. So one of the areas, is outlined in the thick blue and the other home area is outlined in the thick red. Can any part of that robot touch part of that blue line or the red line?
The line is considered part of home.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Because my kids, they ask these very specific questions.
And we're glad that they do, because that's how we want them to be thinking very logically and carefully to be precise with it. So that's good.
Awesome. And then, so when the robot starts and the wheels are completely home, but if you were to draw a line vertically up from the edges, the 90-degree edges of the home, and maybe there's a part of the robot that would cross over that vertical line. So it's basically in the air out of home. Does that count as the robot not starting out completely in home?
Yes, because home is a volume. So there are imaginary vertical walls that go up from those lines. And of course, when we talk about starting, we're talking about the launch area, which is this quarter circle. When we talk about home, it includes this area here, just for clarification. So it has to start in the launch area, but it can return to home. It has to be completely in home, just so we make sure I just want to make sure, since other people are listening, I think we're on the same page of what we said.
Correct. I should have been saying launch area. You're right.
It's not a problem, but since our kids are asking these very technical questions, we will too. So that's just fine. Yeah.
Okay,
and the launch area and the launch area ends at the inside edge of the bottom wall also. That's something else that so nothing hanging over that bottom wall either.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, so you can't have an arm over that wall or even wires or something like that hanging out over that wall. It can't hang out over there.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, great question. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question. The example that was given earlier about say the example with the tray, pulling the tray back into the launch area. You mentioned that if the object or the part of the mission was still sticking outside, but say was lifted up in the air, if you were to pick up your robot, that your robot's inside the launch area, so it's home, it's in there, but the object that you're bringing in, say that tray, was outside, but in the air, suspended. So when you then grab your robot, the object is with it. Does that count?
Yep.
Versus when they took it, but then it didn't come along with the robot.
Yes. So and just to make sure we're talking about the same terminology, this is a situation where the robot is completely in home, and the tray is the only thing that is partly out of home. So yes, if the robot is partly out of home, and that includes if the part of the robot that's out of home is hanging in the air, that's still partly out of home. But if the tray is the only thing that's partly out of home, the robot is completely in home, the way we've chosen to handle it, because the rules aren't really clear on exactly what happens in this situation, we've chosen to treat it as based on the second point of the during the match outside home page, which talks about objects that are left or dropped by the robot. And we've basically chosen to treat it so that if the team picks up the robot and the action of picking up the robot causes the mission model that was partly in home to come completely into home, then that is the team removing the mission model by hand, since it was their hands that caused the action, even though they didn't actually touch the mission model by hand. This is a little bit of a compromise because the rules don't really specifically talk about what to do when something is still in the possession of the robot. And it's also the robot's completely in home and the object is partly out of home. And as such, we're doing that. We're using the 0.2, and we're saying if you pick up your robot in a way that the object is now left, then we can just do 0.2 exactly as it reads. But if you pick up your robot and the action of picking up necessarily involves the model coming with the robot and coming into home, then that is effectively removing the model by hand.
In part, I think partly to clarify this would be is if you have a tray that's being held by the robot above the ground, it's not just sitting on the ground being drugged, for example, by an arm, but it's actually in a tray that's being held, and you're bringing that robot in, and that tray is partly out of it. In that particular case, also, that tray is considered part of the robot at that point in time, because
if the tray is equipment.
If the tray is equipment, right.
And it was not intended to separate from the robot except by hand.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, in that case, so then the robot would not be completely in home. And to be clear, if the robot is partly outside home when you interrupt it and it's touching the tray, then the tray gets given to the referee under 0.1. So 0.1 states the tray gets given to the referee. So 0.2 only comes into play if the robot's completely in home and the tray is partly out, or if the robot drops the tray, you know, if the tray loses contact with the robot and comes to rest partly out.
Raymond, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah. Any other questions?
So I have another question. My students are trying to strategize how they're going to do each of their 2.5 minutes. And of course, what they're nervous about is their robot not properly returning to them like they had thought that it would, or, you know, something happens.
Mm-hmm.
You know, regardless of their coding, whatever the scenario might be. Obviously, then that would cost them a token each time then that they would have to pick up their robot. So since there's 3 sessions of the 2.5 minutes, my students are wondering that if they have already used up 2 tokens in one of their 3 sessions, like session 1, they're nervous and they wonder if they should stop, and that way they can just save tokens for try number 2 and try number 3.
Yeah, so just to clarify, and that is each match is independent, and at the beginning of every match you have a full set of tokens.
Oh,
so yeah, so you get it's 3 complete. Yeah, great question though, because that it's easy to get that. Yeah, so they don't have to worry about that. They will have a full set of tokens each time, and as you notice, the first one taken away, you don't lose any points. So there is kind of a free one in there. And,
yes, that's right.
And all of those, you know, as far as the tokens, it's all about game strategy. And some teams intentionally, it's like, it's okay, we do that. We know that we're going to lose that. However, we're going to gain points because we're going to try something else. So losing tokens is not meant to be the end of the world, but it is meant to be, it's not meant to be totally penalty free, because it is meant to be an autonomous operation, and you really do want it to come back at the best results, return back all the way into home.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for pointing that out to me.
Yep.
That really takes away that bit of a stress.
Yeah.
And then, sorry,
and then
when,
and then just to clarify, they get the best score out of the three
Yeah.
matches. So, and again, each one has to be independent for that reason. So it's all fresh start over each single time, each
Great.
match. Mhm.
and each match they can do a mission that they already did, correct? Is
Yes,
that
because at the beginning of every match, the field is reset completely
Okay.
back to the original area. So each one is, like I say, is completely independent. It's a fresh start. So it's all reset exactly. Everything's set back up the way the directions say in the game manual. Toward
Sure.
the end here, there's a setup instruction. So everything's reset back to where it is. And so it's a fresh match each time.
Okay, great. And the judges there, they set up the match, right?
The referees set that up. Yes.
Referees, yes.
Correct.
Yeah,
They
referees.
set that
Okay,
up,
great.
and so that's really another good point too. So we talked about the judging sessions too, and it's good to review this. So the flow of the tournament will be in the morning. You will come in, you'll check in with your team. You'll be given a schedule of when that check-in is, and then there will be a coaches meeting. One of the very first things. So, and that's all the coaches come in, the head referees in the room, tournament directors in the room. They'll go over. Maybe the judge advisor likely won't be there because they'll be working on getting the judging all set up. But they'll be talking about just any flow, where the restrooms are, that kind of basic thing. And the referee will have any clarifications of what they expect during the matches and that kind of thing. Then immediately after that is over, the judging sessions happen, and you'll have those 30-minute judging sessions. There'll be a 30-minute session, a 10-minute break, a 30-minute session. So you'll have one of those. Basically, a new one will start every 40 minutes. Your responsibility as a coach is to help make sure your team is where they need to be when they need to be there. Know where the judging rooms are, which will be explained to you during the coaches meeting, and make sure they're outside of that room at least 5 minutes ahead of time, so that when that door opens up and they say, come on in, they're ready to go in and get going without any wasted time there. So they maximize their 30-minute session with the judges and get the most out of that experience. And of course, as we talked about, when you're in the hallway, you're a coach. If you're the one that goes in the room, once you walk in that door, you're just an observer, a silent observer, and you can't help them in any way. And it's all the teams at that point in time once you cross the threshold of that door. So then also in the morning, you will have one practice match at the actual competition area. And let me back up just a little bit again. So when you come in, so what happens to your team? We talked about coming in and you'll have a coaches meeting, but what does your team do? Well, the teams all have what we call a pit area. And the pit area is either a 6 or 8 foot table in the gym. You probably have a power source or some power source nearby. Usually we try to get a power source at the table unless there's some physical limitations. So you can charge your batteries, keep a laptop running, and that's your home area. Think NASCAR pit. That's where you do the repair on your robot. And so that's your home base. That's where you can have, whatever your team stuff is. There's usually 2 chairs there. We don't necessarily provide a chair for every team member, but they can be there. In that pit area, there will be a couple practice fields that you can go to, and it's gracious professionalism is a very important thing to observe. So if you're a team, please use gracious professionalism when you're at those practice fields. Don't sit at that practice field for half an hour. Go run a mission, then go back to your pit, do your editing on your either adjustment to your robot or editing on your program, then go back, give people opportunities, because those practice fields are shared that are there. And there's usually one for every 6 to 8 teams, something like that. And other things are going on. So that's usually sufficient as long as everybody practices gracious professionalism with that. So that's very important. So that will happen during that. So, and then at some point in time, you'll have your time where you'll go to the judging rooms and you'll have your judging session with your judges. Then also during that time, you will be scheduled for a practice match at the actual competition table. That's the only time you can go to the competition tables, is when you have a scheduled match. And you'll go up there if their time allows. It's a little more relaxed. That way your team, you can take your team, you can understand where your team members stand, where, you know, how all that works. And we can talk about how team members stand just a little bit here too, but where they stand in there, how you get set up. There's a queuing area where you'll be until they call you in, how you come in, and that match is not scored. You'll run it. They may show you the score. The referees will probably, you know, go through the process and they'll score it. You'll see what your score was on it, but that score is thrown away. It's not retained. It's not stored anywhere. And if there's time, they might let you run another one. It just depends on the time, but it's more relaxed. And then you head back to your pit area. That lets the team members kind of practice the process of going through what to expect there. Then, so that's the morning, what goes on. And the morning is the judging rooms, as we said, that's not an audience thing. Other parents can't go in. This isn't a performance kind of thing. This is a presentation to a panel of up to 3 judges, 3 or 4 judges, usually 3 judges. 2 to 3 judges. So that all happens in the morning. Then usually right after lunch, there will be an opening ceremony. That's when the public part happens, and that's the exciting part that's fun for people to watch, because they can't really watch the judging sessions. And there'll be an opening ceremony, and then that's when the matches happen. And between each one of the matches you have there, you can go back to your pit area and you can work on your robot, tweak your programming before your next match. So there'll be a little bit of time, not a massive amount of time, but there will be some time in there so you can tweak it in between, because we want them to be successful and we want them to be able to have a little bit of time there to change it. It might be 20 minutes, something like that. It won't be a massive amount of time, but there will be some time in between to go back, tweak things, and then you'll have your second match and then your third match. And each match stands on alone. And that's why they're not one right after the other. You'll have some time in between to go back to your pit area and do adjustments, have a little regroup, little you know, cheer session or morale boosting session, depending on how your previous match went, and then you're back at it for another match of those 3. Then once all that's over, you'll work with your team members to tear down your pit area while the judges finalize the awards. And then there'll be a closing an award ceremony at the end, and that wraps up the day. So that's kind of how the flow of the day goes. Hopefully that helps just a little bit with it, you know, where your team members are and that kind of thing. And there's where the competition tables are. There'll be seating around in that area so that people can sit there and people can watch what's going on and watch those matches and see that. And there'll be a scoreboard. The scores will get displayed so you can see how you rank with other teams. And of course, how you are match to match. And again, it's the best score out of the 3 matches.
Okay. And sorry, can I interrupt with one more question?
Sure.
So you mentioned that they can go back to the pit area to do some adjustments. So, but that can only be with materials that fit into one launch area 12 inches high, right?
Yeah, so when they come up to each match, they'll be asked to they'll do an inspection. The inspection does a couple of things. Number 1, is their robot legal? What's legal? Well, is it unmodified Lego parts? For example, you can use a Lego rubber band, but you can't use a Walmart rubber band. Nothing against Walmart. You can't either also use a Target or any other kind of rubber band or Staples or you know. So is it actual Lego components on there? And do you have the correct number of motors? You can only have 4 motors. If you have 5 motors there, they're going to go, yeah, can't work. And they're going to ask you to set all of your materials in this area. Now you can put it in this area and you can put it in this area. You can fill both of those areas up and they have a volume of 12 inches high. So you can interweave things, so you can kind of stack them all together. I mean, you can fit a massive amount of stuff in there if you really think about all you can put in there, because you can, I've seen teams, one part, one attachment gets put in with another, interlocked with another attachment while it's being inspected. As long as it fits in there, What you do is if it only fits in one area, you get a bonus. So there's a bonus points for that. If you have to use both areas, then you don't get that bonus. So it's just extra points for you if it all fits in one area. So yeah, so whatever is there, whatever you're working with, but that's just what the robot has to have when it comes up to that to the inspection time. Once that's done, you can take it all back apart, sort things around, but all your materials have to be held in the home or in the home areas, which include the launch areas. You can't have another table. You can have a bin that you bring stuff up with you, but everything has to be on that table.
So can one team have 2 robots and use 1 robot at a time?
One team can have 2
Are you-
robots. However, they can, let me come up to here to the rules. So there is maximum controller. There's maximum of 1 of any controller at any match. Does that make sense? So if you have 2 robots, you can only, because each robot would have its own controller, you can only bring 1 robot. Because of that, you can only bring 1 of those robots or 1 controller to a match. Now, you could have 1 robot at one match and 1 robot at another match, because between matches, they don't care whether you've changed the robot or use the same robot or another robot or change your parts. That doesn't matter from match to match. However, it's harder to tweak what you have if you're changing robots back and forth match to match. Usually that's not a strategy that's employed, but it is a legal strategy. But it would make it more difficult to, because you do your first match and then you adjust, it's like, okay, this one mission didn't work. I got to adjust it just a little bit. And then you come back for the second match and improve on what you did the first match. And you wouldn't be able to do that if you did. And again, the number of motors, it's a maximum of 4 of any mix of motors, a maximum of 4 at any one match. So you can't have a 5th motor there, even if it's not powered or not being used at that time. You can only have 4 motors at that match. And the same thing for your sensors.
So you're saying I should only have 1 robot?
Generally, that's the strategy that is done, correct. I mean, you
Okay.
could change robots from match to match. That is legal. Whether or not that's advisable or not is something that you would have to determine. It wouldn't be something I would do personally with my team, but it is illegal.
Okay.
It is a legal strategy.
Okay. All right. Because I'm not saying they at the table at the same time. Like you just said, if we do 1, we'll use 1 for one match and 1 for another match. We're
Yeah,
programming it for different missions.
well, you can do that, but keep in mind each match is independent and you get the best score out of the 3. So the scores are not cumulative. So if you do do missions 3 and 4 on first match and you do missions 8 and 10 on the second match, you get each one scores as independent. They don't add up together. It's not like you get points for all of them. So your scores are not going to go up. And then you need to think too about how take a look at your rubrics and how you're going to explain to the judges and make sure the judges understand and can evaluate you successfully on your rubrics. Again, we're not,
Okay.
it's legal to do that. It's whether or not that's the approach that you would want to take.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Mel, this is Trevor Jones. I wanted to just throw in a comment on that. One of my, my team has a strategy. We have 2 Spike Prime kits that we're lucky to have.
Yep.
And one of the things they do is they build 2 robots, but they're identical. And they do that in case they have a catastrophic failure on one, they can back up to the next.
Yep.
And they behave pretty similarly. There's always quirks, but that's just their strategy.
Yeah, and that doing that also would let different team members program different missions on the different robots, and then you could combine all of those into the same robot when it was done. So yeah, that would be another approach to it. But then when you go to the competition, you have one at the table. Yeah, you got a backup if something goes wrong, really catastrophically wrong, which we hope doesn't happen. But you do have a backup then. That's a legal approach. All right, any other questions?
So Trevor put a question in the chat that
Mhm.
I think would be worth talking about. He is asking about if the mat has moved and is not centered on the table. And so the mat this season being in the middle of the table, right, with a significant distance between. In fact, it should be, if the table is exactly 8 feet, it should be 6.75 inches on both sides. And generally, they're pretty. Most tables are pretty close to that. They're within about a 1/4 inch of that dimension. I have found that it is a very good idea, more even than in previous seasons, to tape the mat down at both ends in order to prevent it moving. Otherwise, it really does move, and as Trevor points out, even a small amount of movement can make a difference. So the preferred tape, at least my preferred tape, is half inch black gaffer's tape. And doing that, like having the head referee or potentially a field setup person who knows what they're doing measure that 6.75, make sure it's exactly the same on both sides, and then tape down carefully, getting all of the waves out of the mat. That I have found eliminates problems with the mat moving during competition. I didn't have any instances of the mat moving and that being a problem during the North Carolina season.
Yeah,
so I wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and that brings up just another topic related to processes and procedures there. So if you come to a tournament and it's not taped down, you can't, because it's not a rule or requirement to have it taped down, you can't demand that the referees tape it down. I mean, we'll do our best to make it the best experience for you, but you can't say, hey, you got to do that. Partly because of gracious professionalism. But one thing that I always recommend you do, and this is really the point, is when you come to the field, it will be set up by the referees, and there's field resetters that reset everything back. It is your team's responsibility, though, to look over the field and see if it is set up correctly. And there's nothing wrong with asking the referee, Mr. or Miss Referee, would you kindly do us a favor, and could you, because they'll have a ruler there for other measurement purposes, could you measure the one side for you? As long as it's done in a respectful way, you could check that and see what that is. That is fine. Again, they should look at all the missions, make sure it's set up the way that you think it should be. Now, the important thing to remember with this is if it is not set up correctly, the team members can't reach out and just change it. That's not what they can do. They can say, Mr. or Miss Referee, we noticed that this mission model doesn't look right. Could you check it, because we think it should be this way? They'll look at it. They may come back and go, well, but based on the setup and the information here, it is actually correct. Or they may look at it and go, hey, thanks for pointing that out. We'll fix it for you. They want you to be successful. Just use gracious professionalism and courtesy, and they will work with you on that. All right. Any other questions? Love the questions and discussion. This is helpful for everybody. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, we will let you go. We appreciate everything that you do, all the work that you put in for your team. Thank you very much. And we will take the recording here and post it on our YouTube channel. So if you do want to go back and review it, you're welcome to do that. And I guess the biggest thing I want to say with all of this is, you know, as you're working with the referees there, however you do things, remember that gracious professionalism is the key, both for you and your team members, because how, as coaches, as anybody associated with a team, your gracious professionalism, your core values being exhibited will impact the teams and the evaluation the judges have for the team. So we appreciate what you do. Use that as a positive example to demonstrate if there's issues, and demonstrate how to do things with gracious professionalism. So, all right, you have a great evening.
Mel,
Yep.
I put a note in the chat.
Oh, yep. Sorry, I didn't see that. Where's my chat? Yeah. So we talked about that at the beginning. So yes, please make sure that you've registered for your tournament at adventistrobotics.net. Yeah, we covered that at the beginning. Lovely. We will, if you go to YouTube and just search Adventist Robotics, you'll come up with our Adventist Robotics channel, and that's where we'll post it. And we will try to get a link out to everybody as well, probably just to the YouTube channel versus the individual recording. So that way you have access to that, but that's where we'll post it here. So
is there a list of those who've already registered for the tournament that will be there when we go? Like if I'm going to the Carolinas tournament, will my name be already there? My club?
you won't see it there, but you should have a ticket, email ticket from Ticket Spice, and that's your verification that's there. And you'll start getting communication from your tournament directors as we get closer to that and verification and all that. But if you have that receipt, you're good to go. That receipt, and that's a ticket, but you don't have to bring that with you because we know who you are. We know that you're registered, and we have all those records. So even though it's a ticket, you don't have to have it with you at the tournament. We don't worry about that because we have your team number and we know who you guys are and we work with you on that. But that's kind of your receipt to know that you have paid for it, and that your confirmation that you've been registered.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So I have a quick question.
Yeah.
If there are 4 kids at the table, can
Yes.
one be permanently standing there and 3 being shifting, or they all have to keep moving? Like if you have 8 kids who are participating, all 8 should be at the table, 2 by 2s, or can only one child be there and the rest joining the child?
Okay, so this year's, let me pull this back up here. Yeah, so this is something that's different. So definitely take a look at this page here, which is page 17 before the match. So by the red area, you can have 2 technicians or team members there. By the blue area, you can have up to 2. You have to have at least 1 on each area. They cannot switch back and forth. However, they can switch out. So if they're here, if they're here, they can. Okay, I lost my highlighter. Sorry about that. Don't know what happened, but they can't. Oh, I'm on a text area. That's why. They can switch out, so they can be people back behind. So there will be a line back here somewhere. And I don't really have a way to draw on. Let me highlight. Hold on. Let me annotate here just a little bit. Give me a second to switch things up. All right. So here's your 2 team members. Back here, about 6 to 8 feet back, will be a line over here, and there'll be a line over here, something like that on the floor. This is where the rest of your team stands, and you as a coach can stand back here. This team member can swap out with somebody back here. And this team member can swap out with somebody back here on this line. They cannot cross. That can't happen.
Okay.
And this team, they cannot cross this way either. Once they're on that side, that's where they are. And that particular, that is a line that, and there's no physical line there, but they can't be going back and forth. And you will have a referee standing right here.
Okay. Another quick question. If we have 4 technicians, say technician A, Technician B, Technician C, and Technician D.
Mhm.
If B, C, D are being switched and A is there for all 4 runs, is that
Yeah. Mhm. That's fine.
legal? Is that fine?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Because sometimes you'll have, and that's really your strategy and how you want to do stuff. Sometimes you might have, we've had teams with only 2 people, in which case there'll be one person over here and one person over here, and they stay there the whole time. Or maybe you have 3 or 4 people. If you only have 4 people on your team, they're going to be there the whole time. So that's up to you and how you want to work your strategy. There's no requirement that everybody has to be in. One of the reasons for 2 homes or 2 launch areas and 2 homes this season is to get more involvement of team members.
Oh,
And to be able to do that, that's the intent of it. But read the rules and follow what they say there, and you'll be okay.
thank you, sir.
Mhm. All right. Well, thank you very much. And with that, we will go ahead and end it. And if you have any other questions or anything, feel free to reach out. But we wish you all success. We'll probably have some other meetings just for check-ins for teams that are still participating as we get forward, because we've got about 2 months here of tournaments, about a month and a half to 2 months of tournaments, starting on the 12th of February, going through the what is it? The 2nd of April is the qualifying tournaments. And then, of course, the top teams from those tournaments will qualify to advance to the championship in Orlando, Florida here on May 7th. So that's what we're looking forward to. And that's a lot of fun. That's a great, fun, big event where we'll have First Tech Challenge at the same time for the last time combined. Next season, we're going to split that out to a separate event, but it'll be a big, fun event at Forest Lake Academy here in Florida. So wishing you all the best and have a